Another edition of thelines.com, the Outside Shots College Basketball Betting Podcast, again presented by thelines.com, recording here for March Madness as we look ahead to the big dance and preview what's to come. And on this episode of the Lines.com betting series for the NCAA tournament, we're going to take a look at the three biggest tips in order to win your bracket pool. But before we get started, remember to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notifications whenever the Lines releases a betting video on any sports market, whether it's college basketball, even for a video like this where we're talking about a bracket pool versus a sports betting market in particular, like NCAA tournament futures, even though they somewhat correlate. So let's start off with tip number one, looking at how traditional bracket pool scoring systems operate, as you'll typically see the following number of points for the correct pick in each round, going 1 point for the first round matchup if you pick that correctly, 2 points, 4 points, 8 points if you pick a Final Four participant correctly, then 16 points to make the title game, and successively 32 points if you pick the national champion. So therefore, the most important points come into play in the later rounds, while yes, racking up a bunch of points in the first weekend can be a lot of fun, especially when you pick upsets in the round of 64. Those are always fun and exciting to bet on, not just pick correctly in your bracket pool. It's always important to kind of prioritize the latter rounds, and we'll get to that a bit more later on. So understanding how your bracket pool scoring system works is key. There's not just the traditional scoring systems out there. You have others like a flatter scoring system where you have 1 point, then 2 points, 3 points for the Sweet 16 if you pick a winner in the Sweet 16, and so on and so forth. And then you also, in other bracket pools, get more points for upset picks. So understanding how whoever is running your bracket pool, getting all that information down correctly is extremely vital before constructing your bracket and prioritizing how you're going to go about which round, how you're going to about studying every team, and how you need to prioritize, again, your time for your respective bracket pool. Now, I alluded to this for tip number one, but specifically for the second tip, in order to win your March Madness bracket pool, you really need to focus your attention on the teams that are going to make a deep run. You have to get, theoretically, if you do have the traditional scoring system, at least 2 teams to make the Final Four. Because when you think about it, even if you, let's say, collect double-digit points for the first round and so on for the second round, getting, let's say, to make the Final Four, 8 points for a single team makes up for a not-so-great first round and maybe some incorrect picks in the second round, too. So really honing in on the traditional scoring system, which, again, goes 1 point for the first-round winner, 2 points for a round of 32 victory, 4 points for a Sweet 16 win, and, again, it goes on from there, and 32 points for the champion, like I mentioned. So really diving into your prep and understanding that the title winner is the moneymaker here. You could even have, let's say, a not-so-great Sweet 16 round, and if you get the championship winner, it could be the difference between you winning that bracket pool and you not, just because of how much parity there is in college basketball this season. And that goes directly into tip number 3 in order to win your bracket pool. So understanding the keys for a team to make a deep NCAA tournament run. And what's been the case over the last decade or last 10 NCAA tournament winners, because in 2020, the tournament was canceled due to COVID-19. If you look since 2012, and 2014 is a bit of an anomaly because you had an underperforming UConn championship winner and a Kentucky team very similarly that didn't play well or didn't play up to its potential in the regular season, led by Julius Randle, and the Harrison twins really step it up in March Madness, upsetting, for instance, I believe Wichita State in the round of 32 to advance all the way to the national championship game and nearly knock off that Shabazz Napier-led UConn team. But I digress, going back to one of the more fun NCAA tournaments in recent memory. This year, this season is kind of reminiscent of that. So if you look over the last 10 NCAA tournaments, like I previously mentioned, Every championship winner besides 2014 has had a top 25 adjusted offensive efficiency per KenPom, as well as a top 25 defensive efficiencies. So why is adjusted efficiency important? Well, let's start with the metric itself. Adjusted offensive efficiency means the amount of points per 100 possession a team generates against the average Division I opponent. And obviously, adjusted defensive efficiency, therefore, would be the amount of points a team allows against the average Division I opponent per 100 possessions. So that way, it averages things out where a team isn't inflated per KenPom's rankings because they play in an easier conference, like, let's say, Houston in the American Athletic Conference, even though their metrics are super high up because they still have an upper echelon defense. They've struggled a bit in conference play, a bit more than in years past, which is the point I want to get to here in a moment. But that just kind of shows you in the grand scheme of things why adjusted efficiency matters when it comes to a team making a deep run. Again, besides UConn in 2014, every single team outside of the Huskies over the last decade, with the exclusion of the 2020 canceled NCAA tournament season, has finished with a top 25 adjusted offense, top 25 adjusted defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. So you look at this season, why it may be a little bit different. A team like Houston that I mentioned isn't as elite at that end of the floor without Taz Moore, an elite defensive wing, to generate turnovers and execute Calvin Sampson's trapping defense to the degree it's been, especially last season when Moore was one of their best players on that Elite Eight Houston team. And the Cougars have made back-to-back Elite Eights and the Final Four going back to 2021 before getting blown out by Baylor, the eventual national champion Baylor Bears. The Bears smoking both Houston and Gonzaga in that Final Four and obviously national championship push. So looking at another team that's up there in adjusted defensive efficiency, UCLA's without arguably the best defensive guard in the country, the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year in Jalen Clark. Tennessee, who is also up there in defense, is without their starting point guard. Zakai Ziegler tore his ACL. So many different factors boil into why this year could be absolute chaos and why taking a long shot or using a bit more of a contrarian approach when it comes to your bracket may be beneficial. So now let's take a look at my NCAA tournament futures portfolio. 3 teams there, Texas 30-1, a bit different perspective on them before the season just because you don't have Chris Beard and you have Rodney Terry leading the way. Beard, an elite defensive coach historically during his NCAA tournament run, specifically going back to 2019, I had Texas Tech national title futures, nearly upsetting Virginia all the way in the championship game. Don't want to get into how overtime fared for me, sweating my 100-1 futures bet on Texas Tech when Beard was the head coach there. But don't necessarily like Texas as much as I did going back to the offseason, even though the personnel remains the same. Marcus Carr also needs to find his jump shot in a big way. A couple other teams I have bets on in the field. UConn at 50-1, got a great number on them going back to November, back to before they won the PK85 Invitational around Thanksgiving. And Indiana, I got it 50, 55-1 respectively. 2 tickets there before they upset Purdue in early February. Was hoping Xavier Johnson would come back, the veteran point guard, but you have Jalen Hood-Schifino, you have Trace Jackson-Davis. All those variables go into why I'm high on this Hoosiers team, who's performing much well defensively, much better defensively since the beginning of Big Ten play when they were struggling a bit more with some injuries. Hopefully this team gets a little bit healthier going into the dance. But with that being said, matchups matter a ton when you're constructing your NCAA tournament bracket in your bracket pool. You really want to take, if you're taking a contrarian approach, you really want to keep in mind, yes, you may be high on a team. Yes, I have futures on all those 3 teams, and I also bet a Florida future that didn't work out too well, going back to when Scottie Scheffler, the night that Scheffler won the Masters, actually, back in April of 2022. So even though I may like a team going into the dance, you don't necessarily want to blindly bet that team to make a deep run in your bracket pool just because you may be invested on them from a futures perspective. So those are 3 huge tips if you want to win your March Madness bracket. Remember, be aware of the scoring system. You want to have it, potentially take a look at some late round upsets and the importance of identifying the Final Four winner. teams that make the championship game rather than focusing on the first or second round upsets, because those typically in a traditional scoring bracket pool aren't worth as much just in general. And it's also important, again, to know what it takes for a team to make a deep March Madness run, but also keep in mind, for the third and final tip, that parity could reach a whole nother level, maybe the highest peak since 2014. That's going to do it here for the Lines Bracket Pool Preview presented by, again, thelines.com. Be sure to check out The Lines for more NCAA tournament content. I have a lot more videos on this channel. So long, everybody.